ESPN just dropped their brand new offensive line rankings for the entire NFL, and what they had to say about Miami is an absolute insult to anyone who actually watches football. They genuinely looked at this revitalized group, slapped a bottom three label on them, and utterly disrespected one of our most promising young foundational pieces. Today, we are completely dismantling this ridiculous narrative, exposing the glaring flaws in these grades, and proving why the national media is dead wrong about the trenches in South Florida. If you want the real, unfiltered truth about our squad every single day, smash that like button, share this with a fellow fan, and subscribe right now so you never miss an update. Are we really supposed to sit back and blindly accept that a unit completely retooled with elite talent and returning health is somehow the 30th worst group in the league? Out of all 32 teams in the National Football League, Mike Clay and the national media genuinely published a list putting our offensive line at number 30. They put us at the absolute bottom of the barrel, sitting barely ahead of only the Cincinnati Bengals and the Houston Texans. They seriously expect us to believe that we are trailing completely unstable situations like the Tennessee Titans, the Cleveland Browns, the New Orleans Saints, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Green Bay Packers when it comes to blocking up front. I understand that our offensive line was an absolute nightmare last season. Nobody is running away from that reality. It has been a rough, bumpy ride over the last 5 years, and the film from last season was incredibly difficult to watch at times. But to project that identical catastrophic failure onto this upcoming season is just lazy analysis. Yes, I stood here last year and expected a better unit, but nobody could have predicted the sheer volume of setbacks we faced. I certainly did not anticipate Austin Jackson missing the time he did. I did not anticipate James Daniels being completely unavailable for us. And I absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, did not anticipate our highly touted rookie being the single worst offensive lineman in professional football last year. But you have to look at the context of this current roster. We are getting a healthy Austin Jackson back on the field. We are looking at a massive third-year developmental leap from Patrick Paul. We have an established, elite, all-pro caliber anchor in the middle with Aaron Brewer. We went out and drafted a physical powerhouse in Caden Proctor to inject pure talent into this group. And most importantly, we are finally moving Jonah Savaiinaea back to his natural position on the right side. When you stack all of those massive improvements together, how can anyone logically predict a bottom three finish? This entire offense is mathematically built around establishing a dominant running game, and you cannot do that without a functional offensive line. I am perfectly willing to go out on a limb right now, and frankly, I do not even think it is a risky statement to guarantee that we do not have the 30th best offensive line in this league. I am not completely delusional. I am not going to stand here and scream that we are suddenly a top 10 unit destined for the Hall of Fame. But realistically, we are significantly closer to the middle of the pack than we are to the absolute basement of the NFL, and I think that is a perfectly fair and objective baseline to establish. But the disrespect does not just stop at the overarching team ranking. When you actually dig into the granular, individual grades that were handed out on a scale of 1 to 10, the disrespect turns into flat-out disrespect. For context, the analysts gave every single highly drafted rookie a baseline grade of 5.0 simply because they have not played a professional snap yet. That is exactly why Caden Proctor is sitting there with a 5.0. It is a completely neutral placeholder. But then you scroll down and look at Patrick Paul, our third-year left tackle, and they slapped him with a 4.9. I need to hear from every single one of you on this. Question of the day: do you honestly believe our third-year left tackle is playing worse than completely unproven rookies? Or is the national media just blinded by their own biased narratives? Drop your answers down in the comments right now because this debate is heating up. Think about the absurdity of that 4.9 grade for a second. The national media is explicitly stating on record that they believe Patrick Paul is performing at a level worse than a rookie who has never even stepped onto a professional football field. That is not meant to throw any shade at Caden Proctor. We love the potential Proctor brings to the table. But if you actually turn on the tape and look at what Patrick Paul accomplished last season, handing him a 4.9 is nothing short of insulting. I am not trying to crown him as a top 10 left tackle in the sport, but the man showed incredible promise and development. Statistically speaking, he was one of the most effective pass-blocking left tackles in the entire league last year. Sure, his run-blocking grades were lower, but even those metrics feel artificially deflated. You cannot honestly watch his individual film and conclude that he is a liability in the run game. What you have to factor in is the reality of his environment. Having a historically struggling player lining up directly to his right is naturally going to sabotage the entire left side's production and drag down his overall metrics. It gets even more infuriating when you look at who they ranked ahead of him. That 4.9 grade miraculously places Patrick Paul as the 29th best left tackle in the NFL. That means there are 28 left tackles they genuinely believe are better than him. The names on that list are embarrassing to read out loud. They placed him behind Dan Moore Jr., who honestly struggled significantly throughout last season. They put him behind Will Campbell, who we all watched get physically dominated and pushed around for the entirety of the playoffs. They seriously ranked him behind Cole Van Lanen, a guy who barely managed to scrape together 400 total snaps last year. They ranked him behind a rookie in Spencer Fano. Again, I understand giving rookies a neutral grade, but Patrick Paul is actively playing light years ahead of a rookie floor. And then, the absolute cherry on top of this ridiculous narrative, they placed him behind two guys who did not even play the left tackle position last year. They ranked Braxton Jones ahead of him, who spent the majority of his time operating as a swing tackle in Chicago. And they ranked Troy Fautanu ahead of him, a player who spent his time locking down the right tackle spot over in Pittsburgh. What are we even doing here? How does any logical football mind place an established, highly effective pass-blocking left tackle behind rotational swing players and right tackles? The simple answer is that you cannot. It is a fabricated narrative built on spreadsheet watching instead of film study. The analyst who put this together even tried to defend it online, claiming he trusts his charting over the opinions of our fan base. But the charting is inherently flawed when you ignore context, scheme, and positional reality. It is incredibly frustrating to see a young foundational piece like Pat Paul get torn down by a major network. Now, in the interest of being completely fair and balanced, there was one single shred of sanity in this entire report. The analysts did put some rightful respect on Aaron Brewer's name. They handed him an 8.0 overall grade, which actually tied him for the second-best rating among all centers in the entire league. He is sitting right up there shoulder to shoulder with elite talents like Creed Humphrey and Tyler Linderbaum. That is a genuinely accurate and well-deserved evaluation. Aaron Brewer is undeniably a top 3 center in the National Football League right now, and his presence is the glue holding the interior of this offense together. But the ultimate ceiling of this entire unit is going to live or die based on the development of Jonah Savaiinaea. We have to be honest about the reality of the situation. The former second-round pick had a genuinely dreadful rookie season. It was painful. We spent almost every single week last year debating whether or not he was already a bust, begging for him to be benched, or praying the coaching staff would permanently move him away from the left guard spot. That is how visually destructive his play was. The grades back it up, and honestly, the terrifying part is that the grades do not even do justice to how bad it looked on the field. He allowed 8 total sacks. He posted an abysmal 14.1 pass blocking grade. There were literally 2 or 3 separate games where his pass blocking grade registered as a literal 0.0. I frankly did not even know a 0.0 was mathematically possible in these grading systems. You would think simply showing up, putting on a helmet, and engaging a defender for half a second would earn you at least a 1.0. But that is the dark reality of how devastating his rookie year was at left guard. However, the new coaching regime possesses a massive wave of optimism regarding his future, and that optimism is incredibly contagious. Offensive line coach Zach Yenser has been extremely vocal about the fact that Jonah is going to look like a completely different player now that he is shifting back to the right side of the line. The reality is that Jonah has thousands of built-up reps on the right side. We talked about this extensively just a few weeks ago. During his collegiate career at Arizona, he spent roughly 80% of his time dominating as a right guard and a right tackle. It was only out of absolute pure roster necessity during his senior season that he was forced to slide over and play 400 to 500 snaps at left tackle. His foundation, his comfort zone, and his primary starting experience during his freshman and sophomore campaigns were exclusively heavily rooted on the right side of the trenches. The front office clearly recognized this when they took over the roster construction. They broke down his film, isolated the mechanics, and realized that a massive second-year surge was on the horizon as long as they let him return to his natural home at right guard. His footwork is going to be significantly smoother. His hand placement is going to be incredibly more natural. Coach Yenser specifically noted that Jonah has incredible movement skills for a player of his sheer size, and the tape absolutely backs that up. The main focus right now is fixing his pass protection demeanor, dialing in the precise timing of his punch, and making sure his base stays violently connected to the ground so that defenders are forced to run completely around him rather than cutting straight through his inside shoulder. The most comforting part of this entire situation is a simple, undeniable fact. It mathematically and physically cannot get worse than last year. He was statistically the worst offensive lineman in football. The probability of him repeating as the literal worst player in the sport is insanely low. But even if the nightmare scenario unfolds and he remains completely unplayable after the first month of the season, the front office actually built a safety net this time around. We have a battle-tested veteran in Jonah Saneia waiting in the wings. We went out and drafted a hungry rookie in DJ Campbell in the 6th round out of Texas. We actually possess legitimate security blankets if Jonah stinks up the joint again. He is the ultimate X factor for this entire season. If he simply ascends to the level of an average, completely middle-of-the-road offensive lineman, this entire group has the talent to be a top-half unit in the NFL. If he remains a massive liability, we will be scraping the bottom of the barrel once again. But with a healthy roster, elite coaching, and players finally operating in their natural positions, the national media is going to look incredibly foolish by February. Thank you all so much for hanging out and talking football today. I will be back later with even more breakdowns.